How's it, everybody? Welcome back to the Rocky Fern. My name is Luca and I have OI type 4. And today's episode of Show Me the Green, we're doing moss poles. So I'm taking moss poles from the last episode and I'm going to start putting plants on these big boys and start to see these plants size up. So let's get into it. So to begin, we're going to be using this philodendron. This is Philodendron Jose Buono. It's a really pretty, easy to care for philodendron. I love the variegation on it, and this is a cool plant because it actually shows better variegation in higher temperatures, higher light. So it's something that you can, it's a variegation that you can directly affect based on lighting and the temperature. It's a plant that wants to definitely climb up a pole. It throws out a ton of these anchor roots, adventurous air roots. So right here you see a video of the mix I'm going to be using, and most times mixes are based on what I have on hand, and currently what I had on hand for this mix was rice hulls, pumice that was pretty large grade. It was like 3/8 inch to 1/2 inch size, a little bit of potting soil that is amended with some of my homemade compost, and also some horticultural charcoal. That's just going to help make it super airy mix and allow water to freely drain. So let's get into it. Okay, so from this angle, I'm going to take the pot, the 8-inch pot, I'm going to fill it up, and then I'm going to kind of wedge in the moss pole to anchor it in and fill in the bottom portion of the moss pole with the medium of the pot, like this. Keep going back and forth here, kind of working it up. There we go. All right. It's a very, very airy mix. I'm actually pretty excited for this mix. It should do really, really well. All right, so this is the Jose Buono plant we're going to be using, and we're going to persuade it out of its pot here. It's definitely root bound. It's definitely been needing to be up potted. Wow, look at all those roots. That is crazy. Okay. Then what we'll do is we'll kind of clear out a section here. Kind of break these roots up just a little bit, but Jose Buono is such a vigorous grower that it's a good candidate for pulling the roots apart. I don't always do this on every transplant, but on this one I'm going to. There we go. Here. Then I'll take some clips I'm making just out of some metal here, and we'll just attach it on. All right, so to anchor it in, I'm going to take some of this wire here. It's pretty light, bendable wire. Take me about a 4-inch piece, and I'm going to leave a really long tail on it, something like this, and that will give me an easy way to anchor this plant to the moss pole. There we go. And there we go. It's all potted up. And the nice thing about the moss pole is you're going to get a ton of roots growing inside the moss pole, and that will give me a chance if you ever wanted to propagate. You just cut between the nodes once it's fully rooted into the moss pole, and then you have a bunch of already rooted cuttings. You could always let it grow out and get nice, beautiful, mature leaves, and then you'll have to do a chop and extend, much like the Sydney plant guy does. And his videos are amazing. You want to see some really mature plants? That's the guy to go see. But I'm really pleased with this, and the only other thing I'm going to say is make sure to tap your freshly planted pots. Tapping is going to help get everything settled around the root ball and make sure everything's anchored and happy the way it's supposed to be. And that's it. Jose Buono down. Let's go on to the next one. All right, so this next one's kind of a cool one. This was a volunteer runner off of my mother plant of a Monstera Adansonii. It is a variegated, and it just looked like it needed to be saved from the side of the shed, where you can see it was actually doing this lateral growth along the edge of the shed. I ended up doing some air layering on it with some moss, and it did produce quite a bit of roots. So with that being said, I'm going to bury this kind of deep and start it as low as I can because it's already got pretty big stem. But on a moss pole, these leaves are going to size up really, really big and really, really quickly. So this is the moss pole we're going to be using. It is the moss, or the plastic backed one, and I really like that. So we have our 8-inch pot mostly filled here. Get this thing in, and we're gonna just kind of work it in here. Now, one thing I'm noticing on this moss pole is I'm leaving too much of a gap between the bottom of the filling and the rest of the pot. But because this plant is starting up so high, it's actually going to be up here rooting pretty just beautifully, I think. So, like I said, that root ball is pretty massive. And I want to be able to get it in here. So without breaking any more roots here. Okay, get that worked in there. And then what we do here, kind of fill it in. And then tap, tap, tappy. Get it all settled in there. The gap that's inside the moss pole now will actually end up being backfilled over time as the medium starts to settle, and even the moss pole itself will start to sink down. And one thing I like to do right when I freshly plant a pot like this is I'm going to drench it really well, top to bottom, even the pot. But after that, I actually will only water the moss pole itself, and the pot will end up getting all the necessary water it needs from all the excess runoff. I won't water until it's runoff, at least that won't be my intent. But these plants get most of their water from the moss pole. So again, with my clips, I try to keep a nice curve in there that is naturally there from a rolled up piece of wire, but that curve will actually help me kind of spin it into place and act as a better anchor for this plant. So that has been really nice to find out. And then I'll just keep pushing. Bang, it's in. That thing is anchored. Okay, next one. Okay, swing it around. Ah, look at that. That thing is done deal. In fact, 2 is going to do it for me. And this Variegated Adansonii is loving life. I know it's going to be huge, and I can't wait for the update. It's going to quickly outgrow this moss pole, but it's kind of cool to see kind of a sickly looking volunteer that was kind of growing in an area that, you know, wasn't the best place, but I'm going to put it in a much better spot, and it should take off. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so our next plant is going to be a cutting of my mother plant, the Philodendron Florida Ghost, or Florida Beauty rather, and it is definitely in need of a moss pole. These guys can produce really nice big leaves when they're ready, but this guy does have pretty nice variegation, if not being torn up a little bit, but there's some variegation right there for you. Like I said, it is kept outdoors, and so it does get the brunt of the wind and the rain and the snails and the slugs and all that jazz, but let's get that going. So this guy out. And the update on this video is going to be sweet. So, even though it's been raining a ton, it's good to see that the soil mixture I'm using is able to drain that water out pretty quickly. So there's the roots, you can see, really nice roots. All right, let's get this guy planted. Okay. Okay, we're gonna anchor, twist him in, get that medium up as high as we can up the moss pole. Just kind of side shift this a bit. Okay, there we go. Kind of dig out a little bit more of a chamber here. And we're almost done. I will say that this mat is great for days I can't film outside, such as today, which is why I wanted to, or where I wanted to originally film was definitely outside, but you don't always get to choose where you go. I get that. Okay, so backfill it in here. We'll slap it here in a second. Okay, then as always, anchor it in just where the nodes, try to get a node touching the moss pole, just makes it easier for the plant to get the idea of where it needs to go. And plant, even though it's kind of scattywampus and growing all over the place right now, it's going to want to shoot straight up once it realizes that it can. Okay, so get that guy going, and bang, look at that. It's just a ton better already. I'm really, really happy that I was able to finally get around to doing this. And for those of you who are kind of hesitant to do moss pulls, definitely give it a try. Check out Sydney Plant Guy, because he is kind of kicking butt on the whole moss pull thing right now, especially DIY moss pulls. But he's got some plants that are just amazing, and they deserve to have, you know, their own specific spotlight for sure. But check out his channel, and we'll move on to the next plant. Okay, so another plant that we're going to be doing on a moss pull is kind of a unique one, and it's my seedling Philodendron Ring of Fire. And why it's unique is because these guys have very, very tight internodal spacing, and while they can climb, they don't necessarily need a moss pole. They do put on quite a nice big size once they get onto a moss pole, but it would take a long time for them to actually reach the top of this 4-foot moss pole, which is fine. Hopefully we can get some massive size out of it and some really nice coloring and all that, but you can see it's pretty small. So I'm going to go from this 4-inch pot to a 6-inch pot, and that should last until I have to do a chop and prop, so that's going to be kind of cool. But yeah, let's get this guy going here. Not as big of a base, but still good enough. And then what I want to do, kind of make a little divot here so I can end up putting the root ball in that side. Okay. Now a lot of my moss pulls I actually do suspend. I won't actually put them on the ground, mainly because I have chickens and then pest issues. But the chickens, man, they get into everything. I love them, but they do get into everything. Okay. Shoot, had to break some roots on that one, but that's okay. Not too many. And then this philodendron, like a typical philodendron, has some roots that are going around the inside of the pot, meaning that it is ready to move to something more like this setup, which will be awesome. So let me just cut a little bit more out here. There we go, okay. The cool thing with this moss ball situation is that it is 3D growing, you know, vertical growing, which is really, really such a cool concept, especially if you're tight on space. Tight on space, you got to go up. And with the amount of plants I have, I'm definitely tight on space. So it's kind of cool. And then what I want to do is make sure that I have it anchored up against the moss pole. All right, so let's do, I think this size will do it. And there we go. In fact, what I will do, I think, is I'll go up even a little bit higher and make sure I get into the moss. There we go. Yeah. Now, look at that beautiful thing. Really nice. Okay, there it is in its entirety. Very cool. Let's go on to the next plant. Okay, so for this next plant that we're going to be putting onto a moss pole, it's an existing plant that took off on a much smaller temporary moss pole that I had. It was going to be like a couple month ordeal. Ended up being like a 4-month moss pole, maybe 5 months, but it shot up in 5 months. So it definitely loved the moss pole, even though it's really, really small, and has just, like I said, shot up. So it is a very cool philodendron. It was a wish list, or is an amazing plant. It should be on everyone's wish list if they don't have it. But it's Philodendron 69686, and here it is. And it has a inflorescence forming. So here it is. Nothing awesome. I love the mature leaf. Now these are growing outdoors, and so they do show a little bit of wind damage and some bug damage, but you can see that this is actually a very small moss pole from way back here, and it's got roots growing throughout this entire thing, and it's sized up from less than maybe like the width of a pencil, and it shot up to the width of my thumb in oh, I don't know, 6 inches. So it really shot up, and they love, you know, epiphytic climbing growth. And once they get it, they take off and show their true self. But there you can see the flower forming right here. I hope you guys can see that. And I don't think I'll cut it off. And so what I'll do when you get to encounter this on your own, and maybe you guys can help me with some better ideas on how to do it, but I'm gonna go get this thing soaked, get all the moss pulled off of it, and kind of preserve the roots, and then I'll end up working on attaching it to the much bigger moss pole. But you can kind of see that these were some of the leaves I got when I first got it, and they're not even trilobed. They're not even bifurcated at all, they're just single. But as soon as it hits the moss pole and takes off, it starts to get the trilobed, the 69686 look to it, and it starts to produce some killer leaves. This is its newest leaf right here. So it's very cool. I love this look, very pretty. Has kind of a purple sheen to the petioles, and they're rough. They're very textured. They're not fuzzy like a squamiferum, but still really cool. So I'll be right back. I'm gonna go get this soaked, hosed off, and get this kind of out of the old moss and ready to go into the new moss. So I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are. It had a huge root ball. I was growing it in pond at the time. It's gonna get switched over, but it should be just fine. And I did have to cut a couple roots, but nothing major. And what I found interesting is that the roots penetrated the moss ball and then went straight down into the medium, and they thickened and grew much larger, and then just started to spread and multiply inside the medium. This thing is freaking me out. And that's really what allowed it to put on such a massive size. So I think what I'll do is, I'll try, like I did with the Adansonii, I'll try to bury this as deep as I can and then get this higher up on the moss pole. Root ball in here first, and then kind of get everything situated to the side here. Fill it up a little bit. There we go. And then I'll get the moss pole in, again with the seam towards the back, and then I'll plant it like that. I think that will be kind of the best case scenario. And the nice thing about moss poles too is you can feed a liquid fertilizer. You can do a slow release fertilizer at the top, and so when you water it kind of just slowly trickles down, which works. You can do foliar feed. All those options are great. And you know what? I'm gonna do a much bigger anchor because this thing's pretty big. All right, so let's go with probably like a 10-inch piece. And that will give me a chance to really anchor the base, or the stem rather, without having these little ones come out. So let's just make sure this one's good. And we'll see if we can keep that inflow. I'm pretty confident we can, but we will see. Here we go. Okay. That thing's anchored, and it actually comes around the top, or the other side, and that guy's not going anywhere. Then we'll anchor the bottom part of this stem, just to make sure it's in. All right, so here we go. The 69686 is looking much happier and a much more appropriately sized pole. Okay, for the last plant of the episode, we're going to be bumping up to a 6-inch moss pole, and we're going to be planting multiple Scindapsus cuttings on that, and that should be freaking awesome. And I think I'm also going to put the Gesneriad, the epiphytic Gesneriad, up top and kind of have them grow into each other. So let's get into that one. Okay, so for this last one, I've kind of got a few different ideas of what's kicking around, but I have a bunch of these Scindapsus and Rhaphidophoras cuttings and propagations that I really need to do something with. So we're going to put them all on one moss pole and kind of see what we got. But we have this variegated Scindapsus right here, snake skin, we have black mamba right here. I'll get into that. Okay, so now that thing's in there, and let me just backfill it. I think it's going to work out really well, but we'll have to see. Now this one, obviously I'm going to leave on the ground, but if anything, it will give me a chance to just propagate some more of these kind of cool, rare Scindapsus and Rhaphidophoras, although Cryptantha is not very rare, but it would be cool to have some really big Rhaphidophora Cryptantha leaves. I know they don't necessarily get very big, but it'd be kind of cool to kind of play around and see what we can get. So, that being said, all right, that's that. Make sure to smack your plants. Sorry. And then tell me what you guys think of moss pulls, your success, what you guys like about them, what you don't like about them, if that's the case. But let's start with, I have a bunch of, well, let's do the main guy here. I think we'll have this guy kind of climbing up the main part of the plant here. And I'm gonna get his roots deep down in there. And they're so pretty when they start to shingle. I think they're just so freaking cool. There we go. Okay, and then I'll put one more up top here. And this new growth point actually is where it's gonna put most of its energy, so I'm gonna anchor down that too. I'll anchor them both down one crack. It actually has two new growth points right where I'm pinning it down right here. So you guys can see that there's one here, and then this guy here is gonna be this new leaf. And then it should start to shingle up. Okay. This cool piece of wood or bark that I was using, I thought it would shingle up. And it did for a little bit, but it's hard where it was being kept to keep it humid enough. It's gonna go right here, and then I'll make sure to pin it all the way up to the top. Same with this nice cutting here. Okay, same thing with this guy. Actually, I'll put him behind. Make sure he climbs up. Okay, so this is the Scindapsus. I believe it's snakeskin. It could also be Scindapsus Black Mamba, but I'm pretty sure it's snakeskin. And we'll start it off small. Why not? Wow, that's a cutting, and that's it. So that little tiny cutting, I'm gonna put right here. And just make sure it gets access to the moss pole. And because I have multiple cuttings, I'm kind of pushing the limits a little bit, because why not? So this is also another, I believe it is a Scindapsus snake skin. So we're going to kind of loosen it up out of there. Ooh. And put it next to the other snake skin. And like I said, I'll go through here and I'll start to anchor everything in once I have an idea of how we want this to be. Now this does have a plastic background, so we're kind of limited on where we can put these guys, but I think they're gonna take off. Okay, this is my variegated Kaua'i, and the mother plant actually died on me, and so I was able to save what I thought was a small cutting, but that was months ago, let's be honest, and it has taken off on me. So wow, all that. Okay, so we are going to do the same thing, put this over here and kind of sink the roots in a little bit, and then I'll make sure this gets trellised all the way up the moss pole. And maybe what I'll do is I'll wrap it around to kind of save on space, and that way it can have time to expand and grow. All right, and this is my Black Mamba that is in desperate need of some more space. So let's take it off this plank, and some of them are anchored. Yeah, some of them are really anchored. Okay, but like that, it just came undone. Here we go. Ooh, please, let go. So, got it off the plank of wood, and here we are. So now, where am I gonna put this bad boy? I think I'll put him over here. And I also think I'll get them climbing, and then I'll start to wrap them around so that we can have some space up top. And now I'm trying to decide if I should do this variegated Mayoi. It hasn't produced too much variegation since I put it on this pole, but it is kind of kept in a lower light area. but I notice it has not rooted at all into the moss pole, and that's because this moss pole mix is not my typical moss pole mix. I was experimenting with a drier mix and it didn't work, so duly noted. So this is mostly cocoa chunk with a little bit of rice husk and a little bit of pumice. I would say 10% pumice and 10% husk with maybe another 10% compost, and the rest was cocoa chunk. And it did not work the way I wanted to. It is so dry in there, and I was watering this guy pretty frequently. I would say 3 times a week, maybe, which makes sense because the pot itself was pretty moist. Okay, so get rid of this dead leaf. This is what we're working with, and had a little baby spider in there. Unfortunately, I ruined his home, but hopefully she'll be back. But this guy, I think I'm gonna come over here. Man, I am just hugging this side, but that's all right. Okay, I still think it's gonna look pretty cool, and we're not done yet. Once we're done getting all the Scindapsus planted, I'm going to plant that Gesneriad up top, which that Gesneriad is this guy. This is Kaua'i minor, and it's a really cool Gesneriad. It's starting to produce some flowers here, which are so pretty. Just the caterpillars themselves, I mean not the caterpillars, just the beginning part of the flower where it starts to emerge is kind of cool. It's really fuzzy, and then they produce this really pretty flower. Fuzzy leaf, fuzzy petiole, kind of cool, but it is a epiphytic Gesneriad, and that's going to be really cool to put up top and make this whole chaotic scene more chaotic. Okay, first things first, let's get the Scindapsus, you know, studded up and settled, and then we can work on getting the Gesneriad in there, and then we'll be done with this crazy Frankenstein masterpiece, which I hope will work out really well. Alright, so now you can see the top. And what I'm going to do is kind of make a little indentation here with all the noise going on. And we're going to put this Gesneriad up top. I have several cuttings of this Gesneriad minor, which is going to, or this Kaua'i minor. Very cool. Alright. And I think that will help complete everything. And I can't wait for the update on this. Okay, so same thing here. I'm gonna kind of let this branch out and spread a little bit. Let's see if I can get it here. I think the splash of color that this Kaua'i will provide when it's blooming, in conjunction with the mosaic of patterns of the leaves and different colors from the Scindapsus and Rhaphidophoras, are going to look awesome. So it's been putting on some appreciable growth, even though it's kind of warm outside, but I cannot wait to see the update on these moss poles, especially this guy. We'll call it the mosaic. Why not? Got to name everything, and yeah, can't wait to see what happens. Definitely tune in. So if you want to see the updates on this, definitely tune in. Subscribe, give a thumbs up, comment. I love the comments you guys leave. The channel is growing, especially if you like what you see. Suggest what you want, because I would love to post what you want. We do have a couple viewer suggestions with some Caudex plants coming. That's in the works, and also an update on the Spiritus Sancti. They're doing really well, even though they kind of had a little hiccup, but they've recovered really well. So yeah, thank you for joining, and until next time, we'll see you on the next adventure.